Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Think Like a Thought Leader show, where Black entrepreneurs, leaders, and change makers like you come to learn how to use their impact and influence to build wealth. Now, did you know that Black women make up only 2% of all physicians in the United States? I didn't know that until I met Dr. Omolara. And so, in addition to saving lives, Black women doctors often contend with racism, sexism, pay inequity, and a host of other challenges that negatively impact their own health and overall wellness. It's an emerging crisis because too many of our Black women physicians suffer in silence and in isolation. So my question is, who heals the healer? Today, I'm having a conversation with Dr. Omolara Thomas Uwemedimo. Did I pronounce that correctly, please?
Perfect.
Yes,
It was perfect.
I got it. A board certified pediatrician and founder of Melanin Medicine and Motherhood. She's here to help us understand and answer that question. Dr. Omolara is a board certified pediatrician with a passion for social justice. She's committed to ensuring all mothers and children, regardless of race, income, or background, have an equal right to thrive. So over the past 10 years, she's coached, mentored, and created programs for underrepresented physicians in medicine. And she has a huge list of receipts and results that undergird her transformative work. And I'm so glad that she was kind enough to stop by the show. Hey, Dr. Omolara, how you doing?
Hi, Courtney. Thank you. I am doing really well. Much better now that I'm here. So thank you.
My pleasure. Well, we have a lot to cover today, and I'm really excited for this conversation. I see there are a few people who are watching. So if you are watching this right now, make sure you tap that share button to share this with someone who needs to hear this conversation, because I guarantee you Dr. Omolara is going to drop some gems on us today. So Dr. Omolara, can you talk about the work that you do?
Yeah, so I think like most Black women, we have multiple talents. So I'm a polymath myself. And so I am a trained pediatrician, and I actually run a practice. We launched the practice with two other Black pediatricians to really try to provide care in communities that are Black and Brown, that are underserved, and do it in a way that we thought wasn't happening. And so I am very committed in my work, initially as a clinician and also as a faculty in academia. In that work, why I mention that is that I'm a researcher, a professor, and I also served as a mentor probably for over a decade at this point. And my love and my zone of genius is really trying to mentor women physicians, and primarily Black women physicians, because of all of the struggles that you mentioned thus far. And so I work in teaching, I do clinical work, and then I also do my love, which is my entrepreneurship, which is actually called Melanin Medicine and Motherhood. And that has been, I think, the place where I've been able to really bring everything together and really empower women, also help them understand and move into their vision and their zone of genius, and hopefully stop making themselves smaller and sacrificing themselves, and allow for us to experience what the genius and the purpose that they have to bring with the world. So I'm really excited in being in all of those pots. I will say that I'm migrating towards entrepreneurship fully by the end of this year. So I will be living in my genius, which is extremely exciting. And I think it's really important for that to happen in order to allow for people to hopefully see that and say that it is possible to move into those areas and feel fulfilled and pay your bills and do everything.
Right.
Yes.
Right. We're going to talk about how you help Black women physicians feel more fulfilled.
Yeah.
While still being able to pay their bills in a little bit, because the work that you do is so amazing. But I want to talk about right now the journey that led you here. Mm-hmm. I've had the pleasure of working with you closely as a client. And can you share with the audience the kinds of challenges that you experienced in both your career and your personal life, and how you were able to overcome to get to this moment?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. So I always start with the background. I'm daughter of Nigerian immigrants, and so a lot of my interest around justice has always been kind of due to that context of going home to, Nigeria and then coming here and seeing that disparity. And so that's when I really decided very young that I wanted to move into medicine in particular. What I noticed, however, though, during my career was that, there always was this looming sense of being the other, of not feeling like where you were as a medical student, where you were as a resident, that this was not the place where you were to be. You weren't supposed to be in that place. And what I mean by that is I remember so many instances, and people usually call them microaggressions. I don't call them micro because they're sticking with me. They're still here today. I remember going into to see a patient in the emergency room, and the mother wouldn't get off her phone, and she pointed to the tray for me to pick it up, even though I had my white coat and my stethoscope on. And it was kind of like real. So I backed out, put her chart in the back of the queue, and said, hopefully someone else will be able to take care of her at that point. But those kind of issues where a lot of times, being told that you need to speak up more, or you're not, why aren't you potentially like showing up in a better place, or you're not congenial, you don't seem like you're having a lot of community, you're not working with us. And I think a lot of it was the fact that there seemed to be this divide of, because I was the only Black person in my residency program. I was the only in my residency class, excuse me. And, and that was in the 2000s. That was, and so it just seemed to always be kind of this, you're trying to fit in, and you're trying to kind of compress yourself to make sure that you don't make waves, because already there was a target kind of pointed on, oh, she doesn't really belong here. So, if she makes one slip up, that might actually be problematic. And so professionally, I think that I always kind of made myself fit and conform like many other Black women physicians, until, to a point where it hit burnout for me. So clinically, I've been working, as I told you, I got 800 jobs. And then all of a sudden in 2018, I couldn't do it anymore. I was just like, this is killing me. And so I made the hard decision to say, I have to stop seeing patients right now. I can't do it in this environment. Not come to know 6 months later, I would actually end up in a hospital bed, unable to walk.
Wow.
Yes. And I actually found out in May of last year that I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And it's an autoimmune disorder. And what we do know about autoimmune disorders is that stress is a huge component of those autoimmune disorders, both occurring and being exacerbated. So I, in my heart of hearts, really do feel like some of the things that we see among Black women, lupus, other autoimmune disorders, high blood pressure, poor metabolism, all of those things, I think there's a stress component of the racial trauma we have to go through, as well as a physician, just in general, the trauma of being kind of isolated in this system.
Yeah, and I think that is very relevant to the conversations that we're having today, right? I think that a lot of people are starting to understand that the things that many of us Black people talk about and address or attempt to address aren't just vain imaginings. They aren't just isolated incidences, right? They are ingrained into the very systems and institutions that we have to be a part of. So, I like the fact that you talked about the trauma that we undergo and how that really impacts, or how it can impact the physical health of a person. So you talk about this concept of engineering smallness. And I think it's so brilliant, because so often as Black women in any profession, really, we're taught to do this. Can you share what engineering smallness means and
Yes.
what those watching can do to eradicate that from their lives?
Yeah, so that is not my own. That is from Madame Brene Brown. And so I want to give her kudos on that. But engineering smallness in that term actually means the idea that, and I used to say this, a lot of times we're not afraid of failure, but we're afraid of how powerful we can actually be if we really gave all of ourselves to our genius, right? That's scary because what's that look like? That seems so overwhelming. And so a lot of times there's a lot of safety, especially for Black women, particularly those of us who want to keep our jobs, and in areas that are predominantly white, right? And don't want to make people uncomfortable. And so that requires even the idea of you having Black skin and you're being in these spaces that aren't diverse. A lot of times it's always an eye on you. And so I think that what we do many times is we say to ourselves, okay, what are the ways I can conform? Sometimes it's our hair, sometimes it's our voice, sometimes it's how we talk, how we speak. Sometimes it's what we say and what we would decide, nope, I'm not going to say anything. What we look past, what we allow to actually happen in front of us. And so all of these things are protective mechanisms that we do to stay small, to not allow for us to be seen. And what that does is then that feeds to us we sort of internalize that and then start to just stay there. And I would say that many of the women that I work with, super accomplished, right? Their curriculum vitae are insane, but they're kind of like, I'm not fulfilled, I'm stuck, I'm frustrated, I'm burnt out. And it's clear to me that you deserve to live a life that is huge, where people can see all of what you've put together over your life and see that manifest. And however, we stay small, and it's now really hard because they don't really even understand what the next step is to actually break out of that I used to call hamster wheel, where you're just going and going and going, and then you sort of forget what your actual purpose is and what your vision is.
Yeah. And, I know that medical professionals, especially physicians, they spend, you all spend so many years of your lives getting educated and getting trained. And once you finally get to the point where you're able to practice the profession that you worked so hard to to get into, I'm sure oftentimes there's this sense of delusionment sometimes, right? Like, what am I really doing here? Is this all that it's cracked up to be? Do you find that with the women that you work with, do you find that as a sentiment?
Yeah, so it's interesting because I think now that more of us are becoming vocal about the other side of medicine, right? Now that's appearing to younger generations. So med students are seeing that, residents are seeing that. For me, I would say that there was kind of a code of silence. So it was kind of, everybody was, okay, and no one, let's just keep a good appearance. So there wasn't a lot of vulnerability. And as physicians, vulnerability is kind of taken out of you, because the idea is that there needs to be a distance between you and your patient to provide them with the best care that is not subjective, but is objective. However, what I found is that vulnerability almost has been my superpower in the clinical work that I do, right? And then I've used that, of course, in the personal development work that I do. But the idea that women, when they come to see me with their children as a pediatrician, are able to hear me say, I have difficulties with my kids and I am like struggling, or I realize how stressful this is right now to experience this, or even to talk to your kids about racism, or all of those things, and showing the connectedness has been really important for us to do, although it hasn't been something that I would say historically, our generations past have done, right? I know my mom, she never talked about how difficult it was to work nights and days, or her difficulty being an immigrant and coming over here. She didn't talk about it, just swallowed it and kept moving. And I think the question for us is, can we model for our children, especially our girls, that when you're tired, it's okay to acknowledge that. When you're upset, it's okay to acknowledge that, so that then we're not keeping all of that in. And that now becomes, and Emily Nagoski talks about stressor in her book Burnout and stress response. And she talks about these incomplete stress response cycles where whenever you see a lion, right, cortisol goes up. You're like, oh my God, I'm going to fight, fly, or freeze, right? What are you going to do? And then let's say the lion somehow trips on something and they're not able to eat you. You're still high. You're like, oh my God, oh my God. And if you don't do something, talk to somebody, cry, laugh about it, blah, 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 to close that cycle, that cortisol, all of that inflammation actually starts to wear and tear on your organs. And so many times we live in a society that is keeping us kind of always, I like to say warm, but I'm always warm. I'm always ready. I'm ready.
Right, on go, like
what's gonna happen now? But really, a society that keeps us here, where we're always like, okay, who's gonna mess up, and who's gonna act stupid to me, who's gonna do something that is totally ignorant or racist, and so ultimately you have these incomplete stress response cycles where your cortisol is high, but doing that chronically is what can cause wear and tear to our bodies. It can cause our immune dysfunction. It can cause wear and tear to our organs, our digestive system, our metabolism, all of those things. So it's really important for us to identify. One of the things we talk about is how to close that cycle. And I use her model in the sense of thinking about, where is the stress response happening? What are the signs of it, and how to bring that down? And that's the first step for us as Black women, to protect ourselves from a society that has not really been kind to us.
Absolutely. And I believe it was Audre Lorde who said that caring for myself is not self-indulgence. It's self-preservation, and that is that is an act of political warfare. Yeah. And I believe that to be true, because you're right. We are constantly having to be on the defense in order to protect ourselves. And so you've created Melanin, Medicine, and Motherhood, which encompasses a community and a safe space for Black women physicians. Why is it so important that something like this exists?
Oh my goodness. So when I was going through my journey of basically after the hospitalization and being removed from my work because I couldn't walk, so I had to go on medical leave and relearn how to walk. And during that time period, I remember how isolated I was. I remember feeling like work, because I had just been defined by it so long, that my work taken away from me, I felt useless. I felt there was, what else was there to me? And it made me go in and try to say that can't be true. That really, that the things that I've been doing, that's all to me. And as I thought through it, I started to uncover certain things. I started to realize I needed to build my self-confidence. I needed to start to build my support network. I needed to start to build some skills around having routines and making time for myself. I needed to have a strategy. What was going to be the next plan? And it wasn't until I actually had the reflection time to do that work, to do the reading, to go through that. And I had done all of this in spurts throughout my career, especially in terms of mentorship of women physicians and Black women. But during that time period, what I learned is many of those Black women, just once again, no matter what echelon they reached, felt isolated. They felt like there was still something missing. And what I honestly feel is that, just as a daughter of African immigrants, I just think about community and sister circles and the idea of how it's been a saving grace for us through a lot of turmoil. And I just even though I would talk to a lot of women physicians one-on-one, I would almost be like, you need to hear this person's story, and you need to hear this person's story. And I'm like, why are we doing this whole westernized one-on-one kind of coaching when we actually gain so much more? We know it because that's how we were, that's how we lived, that's how we worked. We worked as a community. We had Ubuntu as a philosophy in South Africa. I am because we are. And so that really was the precedent for me to say, you know what, I'm isolated, but there's probably a lot of other women who are literally, I'm now getting out of my 1.0. There's probably some women who are not hitting that hope. I hope that I don't want to hit there, but that breaking point. For me, it was a hospitalization. For some people, it's a mental health issue. And so I wanted to say, hey, is there a space that we can all connect? And just so you know, it didn't start out as Melanin Medicine Motherhood. It started out as Supermom Rehab. That was what it was. Because it was like but what I noticed was that there were so many amazing Black women supporting Black women, which was great, right? And different things, whether it be the Superwoman myth and all of those things. But the Black women physicians, it's scary. It's scary to let your guard down because you're supposed to know it all. You're supposed to be the one who has all the answers. And it's hard to let that guard down amongst people who don't know the story, because physicians, it's almost like the army as women, like what you have to go through. And so I said, we need a space, and it's just grown. I mean, honestly, now we have about 1,200 women in our Facebook group, and it's beautiful because to see everyone communicating and supporting each other and pushing down these myths that people talk about Black women don't support each other and do that. And it's just wonderful to know that a group like this exists, but not just to kiki, because we like to kiki, but it's not just about kikiing. It's about how do we grow? And so that's I think the exciting part, that we don't want to come into a group and leave the same way.
That's right. A community is so vital to not just survival, but thriving. And that's really what you help Black women physicians do. Now, Dr. Omolara, there are probably a few Black women physicians, and maybe even some high performing Black women watching, who are thinking, things like finding my purpose and being fulfilled are great, but where do I find the time to pursue those things?
Yeah.
So with such a rigorous work schedule and other personal responsibilities, how can folks in medicine start to make space for the things that fill them up?
Yeah. So a lot of times I think it comes from kind of the idea of serving and the whole, patriarchy around the idea that as women saying no, not doing exactly what everyone else wants is negative. It's not even feminine to do that. And the idea, I think, right now is for Black women in general, but definitely Black women physicians, to see what is on their plate that are other people's priorities and not theirs. What is on their plate that aren't even aligned with their values? Okay. What is on their plate that is absolutely not in their strengths, and that's why it's draining them, because they're working in something that completely is not, is not something that they're aligned to do. And if we continue like that, I think a lot of us aren't going to make it very far in terms of being able to actually support our families in the way we want to. And so I honestly think about putting myself first as kind of the core way that I can support my family and make sure that I'm good, so that everyone else is good. And so some of the things I usually say about making space is really about, you don't make space for things if you don't know what they are. And so I usually do a lot of work around, can we do some reflection time to talk about the things that you say are the things you want to do, but you can't do them. It's not possible. And let's break that down a little bit, and let's see, is that a rational thought or not? And then let's go back and let's visualize what would happen if you were able to do that. Can we make space for actually making that happen? What is it right now that's on your plate that could either be automated to reduce the time, could be delegated, or just flat out needs to be eliminated?
Right.
So those are the things that I usually say. And really that can't happen unless you have a clear purpose, mission, and vision. And then you know what you're making space for. And you know when people come to you and they're like, hey, can you do this? So my default is no. And like usually I'm
Look, listen, I would like you to say that again, because the way you just said that so unapologetically, I think that more of us need to hear that. You just said that your default is no.
My default
That
is
is
no.
That is huge in a society that expects us to constantly pour out of ourselves, right?
Yes. And it's hard because if you can't say no, like I said, if you don't know what you're making space for, I know that when I say no, it allows me to give more committed yeses. It allows for me to say, now, if you hear me say yes to you, no, it is going to be on and popping. Like literally that thing is going to be done, and it's going to be done with the effort and the excellence that I know that I can give to that thing. And I want, you know, more of us to say no, but then I say, okay, I say no, and then I go back to think, is it aligned with my vision of where I need to be? Is it part of self-preservation for me? Is this something that I truly just enjoy and am invigorated by? And if those three are not, if it doesn't feel any of those three, then I'm kind of like, yeah, it's going to have to be a no. Okay. But I'm sure there's a lot of other people who would be interested in doing it.
And, you know, even being able to say that, go through that sort of framework is so much more empowering than feeling guilty about the no, right? Mm-hmm. Like, because there's no use in saying no and then beating yourself up about the no, or allowing other people to beat you up about the no, right?
Yes, exactly. Yes. And I think, you know, it really does come from a place of, a lot of times, like we think that many of us think that we're damaged in some way, that there is like either the thing that we're supposed to do, somehow we're just not able to. I mean, I'm in the middle of a workshop series with the Facebook group. And when we talked yesterday about our zone of genius, and we talked about negative self-talk and self-sabotage, and all of them were saying things, I can't do that. I don't deserve this. I'm probably going to fail. And these are women who have been through how much schooling, are like saving lives. Like I have women in my group who are neurosurgeons. Okay. Like that's a lot, residency, and are like, I don't know if I'm good enough. And it's just, this is the damage that has happened with all of the messages that tell us that, you know, because of our skin, that somehow we're somewhat defective or we're not supposed to be that way. And so that's why, as the mom of two girls, it's been critical, although exhausting, right? To like pour, like to a point where they're like, Mom, does everything have to be about Black people? I was like, yes, this. Yes.
That is so like, hilarious. I love it.
Like they're like, okay, we can't watch the show because there's no, like, it has to be a Black character on there or whatever. If there's humans on it and I don't see a Black character on there, then no, we're not watching it. Like, it's literally, it's exhausting, but it's so necessary. There's and you know, one of the things we do is Sankofa Read Aloud, which is this great YouTube channel that is like just Black books or whatever. And you know, they've now gotten to a point where it's like, okay, they know about racism, they know about slavery, they know about that, but they also know that our history is a history of resilience, of pride, of royalty, you know, and so they know slavery is like this blip, right? Yeah. And I think that we have to do, as a pediatrician, we have to do a better job at doing this young, because these kids, boys and girls, need to be prepared. Because yes, I know everyone's talking anti-racism now. I think mostly because everyone's cooped up at home. But once people get their jobs back and other things, is this actually going to be is this still going to be as important to you as it is right now? And I think if it's not, if there's still going to be a lot of hurdles that they have to go through, they need to understand that they are the best thing that has come into this world. And we have to do a better job of doing that. You know, and I just think that's extremely important. So it's part of my, what something I make space for. And that invigorates me to see that. And so I feel like it's really important for you to identify what are the things that are the ways that you get invigorated. One of the things I talk about is, what do you love most to do? What is in your zone of genius? Meaning, what is the thing that, you know, you could do for hours and it doesn't feel like work? So starting to identify those things so that you can grab on them when this world is acting a little bit funny.
That's right. That's right. Now, you said something really interesting a few minutes ago. You talked about how some of the women in your community who are very accomplished, high performing, brilliant, sometimes say, "Oh, I don't know if I can do that though. Like, I don't know if I'm good enough for that." And that's really interesting to know that this is not an experience unique to a certain kind of person, right? This is an experience that is, it's a shared experience, I think, more than we know. So what are the factors as a physician? What are the factors that go into or that impact the way that Black women physicians see themselves sometimes, you know, inside of their own professions and even outside of it, that make them, you know, really embody some of these disempowering beliefs?
Yeah, I think there's always been a guilt to some extent. So one, there's the idea that you know, some women physicians are going through the process, right, which can be quite challenging. Maybe after the process, sometimes they're feeling like, was this worth it? And the idea of feeling like that, when there are very few of us, as you know, to get into that, and feeling like you have a commitment to your society, to your people, to stay in this role, right? Even if, you know, over time, all of us evolve, right? Even over time, if it may not fully satisfy you. So I think the first thing is almost feeling like a little ashamed if there's anything different, or if it's not feeling fulfilling anymore. I think that is a little bit where negative self-talk comes from as well. Like, well, this is what I should be doing. So, you know, even though I like that, that's not actually what I should be doing. The second thing is that there also is a sense of the idea that, what I would say is, how do I relate? I think, how do I make sure that I relate to everything that, you know, that others relate to? And I don't want to outshine per se. I want to make sure that, you know, I'm not ruining relationships. I'm not doing any of that, you know? So I think sometimes we also make ourselves small in that way, where it just seems like, okay, I know I've done this, but I'm still okay. I'm still able to, you know, connect with everyone else. And so I think that's one of the reasons that we try to remain small, and also push down our accomplishments. But there's also this other piece that is just about the idea that, of what you're exposed to. I think so many of us as Black women physicians, you know, you get exposed to the specific circle, which is that the training system, right? A training system that probably was established that didn't think that we were supposed to be in it, right?
Right. So wasn't made for us.
Wasn't made for us. As women, it wasn't made for us. As, you know, people who get pregnant, who have to come off leave, doesn't made for us. As Black people, it wasn't made for us. And so ultimately, you go into this system and you are making it and you're doing it, but then you're kind of like in your head, well, you know, maybe I'm not doing it as well, or you might actually get talked to about kind of this nitpicky thing or this nitpicky thing, and they all just seem to just build upon each other. And so I think it's more of kind of this internalized feeling like, whenever I do something, it goes well, but there's always something I could have done better. There's always something. And so it's this push and pull. And it's really hard to explain to others because a lot of people from the outside will look at you and say, what are you complaining about? You're fine.
Right. You got a white coat, you got degrees on your wall, you have a well-respected profession. What's wrong with you?
So you can't say that, right? You can't say, you can't talk to people and say, I'm a physician and my life is a struggle right now. Like, who's listening to you? Who's listening to you?
They're going to be like, let me break out the violin. There's.
And so that's why there's even this genre of physician coaches, because it was like, we can't go to regular people because they're looking at us sideways. Like, I don't understand.
I can't relate.
Exactly. And so, and I also think that there's a sense of, right, there has to be one thing that you do, right? And I think we're learning now, especially as millennials, we're learning now that you can have multiple passions, and you change over time. You don't have to stay for 30 years and get a pension in one thing. You can change over time. But I think the academia, healthcare has not caught up with kind of the rest of society. And so it becomes difficult for Black women in general to say, I'm going to branch out, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to actually follow my desire. That just becomes difficult.
And I think you've made it easy, which is why I want to talk about this personal development and wellness program you've created exclusively for Black women in medicine. It's called Empowered, and it's the only one of its kind. Can you share what it is and why it's so necessary, especially right now?
Yeah, so we talk about Empowered. So Empowered it's like a 6-month kind of incubator, right? You come in, you're okay, but then we just keep you in that little circle, fill you up with all of this stuff. Then you go out and you're just like ready to kick butt, and ready to do what needs to be done. It's a journey that focuses on, I think, 3 things. It focuses on getting clarity and getting clear on what it is that you want, what it is that is your purpose, what is it that is your mission, and also your values, so that's going to be the guiding step for you through, your journey. And we also talk about confidence and rebuilding that, because whether it's outside of healthcare, inside of healthcare, there's a lot of both pressure and a lot of messages that are negative about us. And so building up that confidence, that is also about kind of creating the routines and building up skills of maximizing your time, of learning how to say no without the guilt, right? Of practicing self-preservation, but in a way that recognizes that the stressor needs to be dealt with, but then there's the stress response, which you can control, and make sure that these stressors that are uncontrollable will not actually, become a death sentence for me or become an issue for me. And then the last thing is around, I would say, I usually bundle it up, but I would say the courage to have a community. Instead of living life alone and isolated, the idea of identifying who's going to be your support system, and then who's going to be your strategic partners for accountability. Who's going to keep you going on that path and saying, hey, you said that you wanted to move in that direction. Who are the people that you can share your vision with, even if it sounds ridiculous to everyone else? Developing that and doing delegation to allow for that to happen strategically. How do you have difficult conversations? How do you make sure that you feel good, right? Being able to say, you know what, you need to do that now because I need to do this. And being able to be comfortable with that. And so when women leave, they're getting weekly, basically we meet weekly, but they also get these wonderful kind of trainings on videos, and they also get the workbooks where they do the reflection. So they come back to us weekly. We meet one-on-one throughout their time period. And the other piece is kind of just a huge amount of these personal development books that they're able to read, that we're able to go through, that complement the journey. So all of that is almost kind of this, like I said, little community where you are able to talk, become vulnerable, share your wins. We have a Slack community. So in between our sessions, like somebody's like, I did this. And we're all like, yes. And the idea that you might not have had a place to share that, even in your family, to say that, because is it bragging? Is it doing this? But having that community and learning what it's like, feeling what it's like when you have a community that supports you, so that you can start to identify those strategic people outside of us, so that you're ready to leave the nest after the 6 months, right? These are all important things, tools, skills, and muscles that need to be cultivated. So that's really what we do. Women leave much more fulfilled. They leave with an identified path, and they actually leave with a plan. So we create a whole, plan for a 6-month plan for the rest of the year after they finish, which includes their 90-day objectives and their goal areas. It includes their action steps. And it includes who their strategic partners are going to be, to make sure that they've identified, to make sure that they're keeping track with it. So it's work. It's a lot of work, but it's like my husband always says when I leave a coaching call, he knows, because like I'm grinning ear to ear. He's like, every other time you have this like stoic like look on your face, but then after you finish a call, it's always like grins, and that's because it's just something that invigorates. So because I'm feeling that, I want other women to go and do work that has them grinning ear to ear. I can't hear you. I can't hear you.
I'm sorry, I was on mute.
Now I can hear you.
So I was saying that I believe every woman deserves to feel fulfilled in their profession and their passion. So as a mentor and a coach, you've helped so many Black women doctors find purpose, their unique purpose, and fulfillment in their lives. What are some of the most surprising discoveries your clients have made about themselves while in the program?
Oh, goodness. I think one of the surprising discoveries is that what they wanted before has not changed. That's the first thing. Like, it's the idea that they've made themselves busy, right? And forgotten that. And then when we peel back the layers, it's like, oh, that thing that sounds so big and extraordinary is actually what I'm supposed to be doing. Okay, and it's finally realizing that it is surmountable. It's actually something that you can actually achieve. I think the other thing is the confidence piece, right? The idea that there's so much control over your thoughts, that you can capture negative thoughts and you can counteract them, and that your thoughts actually impact your feelings, which impact your behaviors, which create the certain habits you have, which create the character and your legacy. And so it all starts with a thought. So if you can capture those thoughts, right, and say, instead of, I don't deserve this, I deserve this. Do you know how hard I worked for this? And start to capture them all the time. The importance of visualization. We talk about like that muscle of the fact that we haven't used visualization since like some of us since we were like 5 or 6, right? Imagine your imaginary friend. We haven't done any of that. But the idea of seeing where you want to be in 15 years, seeing it, like seeing what you're wearing, seeing what the day is, seeing who's around you, who's not, who's gone, who's not around you, and saying, now, how do I go back from that? So what do I need to do? If that's 2035, right? In 2035, I am going to be 53, okay? If that is 2035, then what do I need to do in 2030 to get there? What do I need to do in 2025 to get there? What do I need to do right now to get there? What's not the most logical step? What's the most courageous step that I can make today?
That's an important distinction. Can you talk a little bit more about this idea of making sure you take the right logical step versus that courageous step. Because there have been times in my life where I've definitely had to take the courageous step, and it looked crazy initially. But, you know, after getting to the other side of that uncertainty, it was like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad that I listened to myself. So how can people who are in professions, especially in medicine, that tend to be very methodical and calculated, how can they free themselves up to be able to adhere to their gut or intuition, or, like you mentioned, the courageous choice that they know they should be making?
Yeah, I mean, it all starts with the thoughts, because very easily we can say, no, that makes no sense. But then the idea is using that reflection time. And I think, and I go back to it because too often we've allowed ourselves to have so many things impede on that. And so then we don't have that time to actually tease out, is what I'm saying absolutely irrational, or is there a step that I can make in that direction that I can start to see, oh, this is actually working out? Okay. I like to, the workshop I'm doing is called the Pivot into Your Purpose. It's not a leap. It's not leap into your purpose. Okay. The idea that pivoting requires one foot firmly in the ground, okay, firmly, and one foot that is just kind of looking and saying, okay, let's move a little bit and a little bit and a little bit, and being able to not be so hung up on results, right? But seeing what the trajectory is. Am I going, each time I make that step, am I going here? Am I being more fulfilled? Am I being happier? Am I less stressed? Okay, maybe I'll do a little bit more. And making sure, I remember one of the big things that has come up for a lot of our women is, this seems so huge. Okay, yes, we don't have to do all of that at once, right? You want to build a hospital. Okay, we don't have to build the hospital tomorrow. Who do you need to meet with? Who's the first, like, what do you need to, let's start small. What does building a hospital consist of? Oh, I don't know. I didn't talk to nobody about it. Like, what is that? Start going back into what are the small things that you can start to do. But the courageous step is the one where you're acting in integrity. And there is no person here, right, who doesn't know what that feels like when you're acting in integrity, when you're acting outside of your integrity. It eats at your stomach. It gives you a headache. You got some backaches because you know that you would do it differently, but you're just being safe and being small. So that is what the most courageous step. The most courageous step is the one where you're acting in line with what it is that you truly want.
Now that makes perfect sense. So we understand that you serve Black women physicians, but who exactly would be a good fit for your Empowered program?
Yeah. So, I like to say, yes, I don't let anyone in my program because really, so there's a few things. So one is, you have to know that it's costing you a lot to stay where you are. That it is just like, you can't take it anymore to just continue on the path that you're going. It might be costing you your sanity. It might be costing you your family. It might be costing you some migraines. It might be costing you whatever. But this is a sooner, if not yesterday, a sooner rather than later thing. The other thing is, it really is for women who, I would say, oftentimes women who've been practicing a little bit and then they're kind of like, no, this is, I don't know what's going on. This is not, like, this is great. I love my job. And I want to be clear. This is not about people leaving medicine or anything like that, because we need all of us in medicine. We got too few of us in medicine, but it's about making sure that medicine and the career in medicine doesn't become a sacrifice for us. So how do I shape my career in medicine to fit me? So for some people, it's like, I practice, I love the time with the patients, but I do all of this paperwork and I do all this other stuff. How do we fashion that life in a way that fulfills you? Well, who do we need to delegate stuff to? Who do we need to hire? What is it that we need to, create so that you can still do the work you love, but in a way that is going to fulfill you. And I think about that is the idea that this is, yes, it's about you, but it goes back to Ubuntu. I am because we are. So I want to do this work because, like you mentioned earlier, I am committed that if we have us, that's one thing, right? We have a diverse workforce, that's one thing. But if we don't have us well and working our gifts and working powerfully for our people, like, then why are we there? You know, if we can't be that person, if we're just kind of conforming to the status quo instead of pushing them to say, this is not the way that you provide care for our people. You're gonna have to do it differently, and I'm gonna show you. This is how this needs to be done. And if we cannot act in that way, there's a book from Stacey Abrams called "Lead from the Outside," which is like the most inspiring book that I've read. Like when I first was on my journey a couple of years ago, I was like, oh my God, you can do that. Like I was like you could actually like go outside of something and then potentially change like how that system works. Like, and it just blew my mind. And it's kind of like the idea, yes, you can choose that. You can also break barriers inside. But the idea is if you know that something's wrong, not settling. Those are the women who refuse now to settle, are tired of settling, are tired of feeling frustrated, tired of feeling confused, tired of being burnt out, and really know that they're meant for more.
I love that. And so how can or where can individuals go to learn more about Empowered, Dr. Omolara?
Yeah, so Empowered is our flagship program for melanin medicine and motherhood, and it's at my website, which is www.omolara, OMOLARA, If you put melaninmedicinemotherhood.com, you'll also get there as well. And then you can click work with me and it will take you exactly to how you can work with me. But there we have my podcast there, my links to my blog where I do some venting / educating about a Black women physician. And it also has all of the information in terms of what inspired me, like what's my story. And so that is, and also the speaking and media that I've done on different podcasts and different radio stations. So I'm really excited at people. I'm really excited at the movement that's happening around, anti-racism. I am skeptical because I'm a New Yorker. That's just how we're built. But I am skeptical. But,
and I mean, you're also a Black woman. And I think a lot of us are like, okay, well, how long is this going to last? Because we've seen this before, right?
And why is this happening now? Like, so no one heard us, like, multiple times. So,
yeah.
So I do think that in this, what my work does is it says that we shouldn't, even in anti-racism, then provide a supremacy where the goal is to educate white people and not provide support systems for Black people and those who have been the oppressors. That both need to be done at all institutions. So I think that's the key thing that we also need to make sure that it doesn't trickle in as we're moving this forward and saying as institutions we're committed to this, that we shouldn't just be like, oh, the Black women, they're fine. Let's just educate these. It's not, it's a both and. And I am really about ensuring that that other part doesn't get missed, that we don't fall to the wayside again in this time, in this era.
Well, Dr. Omolara, I know that there are only 24,000 Black women physicians in the U.S. Or around that number. And after working closely with you and seeing what's inside the program, you all, if you're watching this right now, you're a Black woman physician and you have been nodding your head yes, and snapping and wanting to throw a shoe because Dr. Omolara was just really going down your neighborhood and really touching on some of the things that you're experiencing, that you've been feeling. I promise you, you definitely want to go to her website, www.omolaramd.com to learn more about Empowered. It is a powerful program that I think is necessary for every Black woman in medicine. So, Dr. Omolara, what do you say to those watching who might be on the fence about enrolling? And they might be thinking, I need a one-on-one experience because I don't like sharing my business with strangers. What do you say to that?
Yes, I think I get that literally on every discovery call I have, but groups, like, so you want me to tell other people? And I say that our superpower is vulnerability. That courage doesn't come without vulnerability. And so I usually say, first of all, I give them the stats that 42% more likely to do what you said you were going to do if you're in a group. But I say also that the ability for you to succeed comes from hearing other stories and growing your network and your pool of sisters who are moving you towards that direction. And I know for many of us that we know that some of the things that we got through because there was somebody there. And it's not easy work either. It's hard work, but it's meaningful work because every week, like, it was so funny in Slack this week, because I'm doing the workshop in the Facebook group, I gave my Empower group the week off to catch up on their stuff that they're doing, and they're putting in the Slack all sorts of things like, we miss old Omolara, she comes back to us. I'm just like, you guys, this is a little dramatic, okay? It's literally a week. But the idea of them being able to communicate and connect with each other is really powerful. And literally, you have some new built-in girlfriends, because it is Empowered is kind of like the army. Like, you let everything out, and then, like, those people know, like, they're like pushing you. I just had a group from January who invited me. I don't think I was supposed to get the invite, but they said, okay, we'll invite you for my group that I set up, right? They met in June and were like, I guess we should invite her. And this is after they finished the program, but they would just want to catch up.
That community is still there.
It's still there. They're still connect. That's the thing. It's just a growth every week, learning, connecting, sharing what you're struggling with, getting the answers, looking at other people sideways, like, even though I know that I'm messed up, you're not messed up. Why are you acting like? So literally these kind of things where you start to see yourself, like, how ridiculous some of the stuff that you're saying is. So, I mean, if you're interested in really having transformation, because yes, one-on-one coaching is great. It works for some people. This is really an experience, a journey. And so it's different. And so it may not be for everyone, but it is something that, was made specifically for Black women with them in mind, not as an afterthought or just pushing them into the whole thing. And so I think that's really important to know.
So, since this is the Think Like a Thought Leader show, I'd be remiss if I did not ask you, who are some of the thought leaders that have impacted you on your journey? I know you mentioned Stacey Abrams in her book. Who else?
Well, Toni Morrison, God, like, I cried. Is amazing in her work. I do love Brene Brown. Like, she's absolutely great in terms of the work that she does. I'm also really excited about some of the work. It's interesting because I love, I'm really excited about some of the work of Brittany Cooper, who has talked some amazing things, specifically about, I remember there was one thing that she talked about which really grabbed me, which was the fact that we keep fighting and fighting for what we need and fighting, and then because we're so used to fighting, once we try to relax, our body starts fighting ourselves. And thinking about kind of the autoimmune stuff, and so I love Brittany Cooper a lot. I'm really just into people who love Black women, of course, Audre Lorde. So I'm just really into people who love Black women and aren't scared to say Black women, right?
Yes.
it's a unique thing, and I definitely got a lot of flack about why not everybody, and you know what that is like. But I got a lot of flack. But I think reading and listening to those people and feeling more assured that this is something that, you know, I'm compelled to do specifically for Black people, and, you know, being okay with that. And I think that's what you want. That's when you're acting in integrity, when you know that there's going to be the naysayers, there's going to be the haters, there's going to be even the people who are like, we just want you to be successful. And those people, God bless their heart, as they would say in the South. But, you know, the idea is really remembering kind of why you're doing it, what you're doing it for. Because I will say I wobbled. I was like, but, you know, and then I was like, no, who is this for? Who are you meant to serve? What is the purpose that he put you to do this for? And I think that's what's so important. And that's what I hope that the thought leaders that I've read are really clear about. And I hope that more and more women jump into their purpose and are unabashedly and unapologetically faithful to what they want.
I love that. And thank you so much for the work that you do, because I asked the question at the beginning of this conversation, who heals the healer? And Dr. Omolara, I think that you are one of those people. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. This is fabulous. Thank you. And I love what you're doing here. So thank you so much. And, you know, I love being a client of yours, and I love just like being able to just talk with you. It's been absolutely fabulous.
Yes, it's been a joy to work with you. Now, before we get out of here, I need you to tell me or tell everybody else how they can connect with you, because let me tell you something. Dr. Omolara did me a solid by allowing me into her exclusive community, Melanin Medicine and Motherhood. And when I tell you, that place is popping, like it's an amazing community. So if you are still on the fence about whether you want to, you know, hire professional support, know that there is a community available to you. So can you talk a little bit about that, Dr. Omolara?
Yes. Oh my gosh, my favorite topic. Okay. So Melanin Medicine Motherhood Facebook group. We have, like I said, almost, I think we might have hit the 1,200 mark. I'm not sure. Black women in that group who are physicians. And literally, we just try to put as much inspiring work, but also we do things like Teaching Tuesdays, where we'll like teach a specific topic, because that's my zone of genius. I'm not the greatest like rambler, but I'm really good at teaching. So teaching, then we do something called Spotlight Saturdays, where women in the group who are doing extraordinary things, we have them share their business, but also share their journey. What were the challenges, so that everyone in the group can learn from that. And then the other thing that we do are workshops. So right now we're in the middle of a workshop where it's called Pivot into Your Purpose. And so the goal is really, and also, of course, just putting in different articles, my podcast in there, so people can just consume, but not just consume, take action and start improving on themselves. And so that's kind of what we do in there. And it's a safe space, because people are just like shouting out people. Yay. Sometimes, like if people have articles published, we'll put those in. So it's just a great place to just feel inspired, especially when there are a few places that we can feel safe and inspired outside of that group. So that's the group. It's fun, and it's Melanin Medicine Motherhood. And please don't get it twisted. Non-moms are welcome, very welcome, open arms. So I put that actually in the title.
I noticed that. Because I'm sure that was a common question.
That is, yes. But yeah, so anyway, that's the group. It's awesome. And thank you for coming in and shouting out the group, because we try our best to do good work, you know.
Yeah. And y'all, Dr. Omolara is always doing something inside this. This is not one of those groups you join and it's kind of dead. it's lively. You also need to get on her email list because she sends out so many amazing resources. You're just a wealth of knowledge. And how else can people connect with you?
Yeah, so I mean, ultimately, you can consume and my podcast, which is Melanin Medicine Motherhood. I do, discovery calls. So basically, if you're not sure, you're like, this sound good, but maybe I need to talk to her. So you can do that. There, you can go to work with me, or you can just go straight. There's a bit.ly that I have, which is called bit.ly, and it's empowered. My program is MPOWERED call, and you can literally just do that. And we can actually talk for a few minutes, go through what the situation is for you, what you're struggling with, where you want to be, what's holding you back, and try to figure that out. And I also do strategy sessions as well, which are just short little sessions where we'll figure out what's the main thing. I have an assessment that helps us to figure that out. Like, where's the area? Is it self-confidence? Is it skills? Is it support? Is it strategy? And then we kind of hone in on the one that seems to need the most work. And yeah, so different ways. But I'm also, I have an email. It's hello@omolaramd.com. So that's probably the easiest way.
So many ways to connect to such an amazing thought leader. Thank you so much for taking the time to stop by the show, Dr. Omolara.
Thank you, Courtney. My pleasure.
Now, if you enjoyed this conversation and it inspired you in some way, I'd love to hear about it and know your number one takeaway. So drop down in the comments and tell us what your aha moment was. And don't forget, sharing is caring. So please be sure to hit that share button to spread the love and the word about this show. And finally, in an effort to stay true to our vision and remain unbossed, and unapologetic, we've created the opportunity for those of you who enjoy this transformational content to support us monetarily through Patreon. So for as little as $5 a month, you can invest in a network dedicated to creating programming for the uplift and the enrichment of Black people through media and entrepreneurship. So to patronize us, please visit thinklikeathoughtleader.com. You can see it down below and hit that green button that says, let's build this. Your monthly investment will help build a groundbreaking multimedia company that will shift paradigms and empower a generation of leaders and entrepreneurs in the future with thoughtful programming and high quality content. So to learn more about how you can invest in what I believe is a worthy cause, go to thinklikeathoughtleader.com and consider becoming a patron. Thank you so much for your support. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for engaging. I just love you guys. And that's all from us. Bye.